Hi, it's Nick here from Conservation Careers and welcome to the podcast. Now, in this episode, we're speaking to Stella Diamant. Now, Stella is a passionate conservation biologist who founded the Madagascar Whale Shark Project, and she's introduced a code of conduct for whale shark tourism, initiated an environmental education program for Malagasy youth, and has also identified almost 500 individual whale sharks when previously they were thought to be around 20 in her study area. She's now working in collaboration with other NGOs and helping to ensure the code of conduct is being added to Malagasy law and will soon be compulsory for all operators across Madagascar interacting with marine megafauna like whale sharks. Now, she's an old friend of Conservation Careers and she talks candidly about her insights from her experience founding and running an NGO single-handedly. She also talks passionately about why whale sharks matter and what she's doing to help conserve them. We also discuss her career's advice for budding marine conservationists, perhaps like yourself. Now, this is a new format of the podcast where we invited members of our community into the recording as an audience and also invited them to ask questions of Stella once the microphones were turned off. If you'd like to be in the audience of our podcast recordings, please join the CC Academy and come along and join in. We'd love to see you here. Righty, let's hand over to Stella and get this show on the road.
I'm Stella Diamant. I am the founder and director of the Madagascar Whale Shark Project, and I'm also a conservation biologist by training.
Wonderful. Yeah, and I feel like you're sort of an old friend in many ways, because we were just saying before we started recording that we've known each other for nearly 10 years, because you very, very kindly volunteered back at the early days of Conservation Careers as a blogger. So it's nice to kind of connect properly 10 years down the road and hear about all your work, because, I've sort of been following you on the sidelines for a while and there's lots going on to share. Where should we start? So you're the founder director of the Madagascar Whale Shark Project. Let's start talking about whale sharks. That seems like the obvious place to start. I mean, they are such beautiful, charismatic, amazing species. Tell us about whale sharks. Why should we care? Why are they special?
So initially, I was always in awe of them, but I didn't really know much. Actually, I knew nothing about them. It's when I saw one for the first time that I was, blown away by their size. So they can reach lengths of 20 meters when they're fully grown up and quite old. And they can live to, we think, 130 years old. And they grow very slowly. So when we see them, especially in Madagascar, but in most places where you see whale sharks, they're still very young juveniles, and they still have so much of their life left in the ocean. They can go very deep. We don't really think of that, but they can go to at least 2,000 meters. So it makes studying them very complicated. And despite the name, they're from the shark family. They're not cetaceans, so they don't need to come back to the surface to breathe. They do come to the surface to feed, and that's, when usually we see them, it's because they're coming to the surface to feed during seasonal events, like in Madagascar.
Yeah, and they eat like plankton, tiny little crustaceans and little fish, things like that.
Yeah, it depends from where they are in the world, but it's mainly, from little tiny shrimps to krill to other types of plankton. And in Madagascar, it's fish a bit bigger, a bit like anchovies and sardines. Mm-hmm. And because that food is so rich, when they're growing in their teenage years, they will seek out that food actively and come back to the same place for quite a few years to come and feed on that. It's like a canteen. And then when they're old enough, they venture in the open ocean and they likely feed on other food deeper down, and that's why we see them less when they're that size.
And I guess that, as you sort of touched on yourself, that makes them really hard to study and to research. Like the bits that we see and know the most, I'm assuming, is when they're up at the surface, maybe at breeding grounds or feeding grounds, but there's the whole life cycle element where they're going deep or out in the open ocean where we know a lot less about them. Is that a safe assumption?
Yeah, well, actually, the whole breeding part we know nothing about. We still don't know where they mate, where they give birth. All of that has never been seen before. So we mainly see them when they feed, when in the juvenile years. And then there's a few places in very kind of open ocean habitat like Hawaii and St. Helena, where you'll see all the sharks close to sexual maturity, and that's likely, we think, maybe where they come to breed or to seek a mate, because the behavior is a bit different. Yeah, but it makes it's complicated to track them. Yeah.
Yeah, and they're tropical species, is that right? Do they come out into temperate waters as well?
A bit more now. There's been one in the Mediterranean last year
Wow.
because of the warming ocean, but yeah, they mainly stick to tropical.
And where did your journey begin with whale sharks then? Where did you first connect and get excited?
It was a bit after I got involved with conservation careers, I think. I was at the time starting to work with the ocean cleanup as a marine biologist and expedition coordinator as it was all kind of picking up. So I was based in the Netherlands and mainly volunteering, doing other jobs on the side, and I kind of wanted more and more to start my own thing. And then I went back to Madagascar, where I had been the first time in 2011 on the kind of first job out there. And I had a break in between kind of two jobs in the Netherlands. So I went back because I had some project ideas that never came to life. And then, in all of this, I saw a whale shark where I work now, because my mum came to meet me and we did a bit of a trip in northern Madagascar. And I thought it was incredible that these animals still exist, that they're so big, that they're completely harmless. And so, the same night I asked the guys, the operators, like who's managing this, who's running the research on this, because I felt it was an ideal study site because you're very close to the shore, and usually whale sharks you're in kind of rough seas or turbid water, and here it was lovely conditions. So I was expecting like a big university organization to be behind it, and people said no one's doing anything. So that's kind of how I saw the opportunity. And then it still took me nearly a year before I actually left that job and decided to obtain training in the field techniques myself. But I did then a bunch of research to find out if really there was no one else, because as we know, research is quite territorial, especially in these remote places. So I wanted to be sure I wasn't doing work that had been done already. And and that's kind of how the motivation came to life. And then once I had quitted that job, I went back to my parents and I kind of did grant applications again and again and again to get a bit of funding to go for a first season, just me back there. And I had managed to kind of negotiate a free spot on one of the tourism boats. And so I got that initial funding, and then I went back 2016, and that was kind of the first season I did. And now I've done 5. And initially, we thought there were maybe 20 whale sharks because people kept recognizing one that had a cut tail, but actually we know now there's many with the same scar. And we've nearly identified 500. We're sitting on 496, which is completely unexpected. So actually it's one of the biggest whale shark feeding aggregations in the Indian Ocean now.
That's awesome. Yeah. Wow. What were your sort of intentions and goals then of setting the project up? You say you came across this site with your mum, you came across a whale shark, didn't think anyone was managing or researching it. It's a great site. It's perfect for doing it. What's your goal? What is it you're trying to do? Obviously, how many whale sharks is a key question you're trying to answer, and you're getting that. But paint a picture as to what's going on.
Initially, it was mainly I had no clue this would become my life, because it's a lot more than a job. It's really a life of a project. So it was mainly finding out if there were that many whale sharks. I never expected it to really have that much traction and attention as now. But really to be honest, I felt quite frustrated because as a kind of ecologist, I went on a few projects where there's great research being done. It's often fundamental, what is this behavior we're seeing? Can we write about it?
Yeah.
And then people leave, and then the communities know nothing about the research. They're not involved. They kind of even develop this like anger and aversion towards researchers, towards these white people who come in and kind of benefit and then leave. And there's no like knowledge transfer between these people who have lived there their whole lives and know a lot about these species and then what's actually being found. So each time I was kind of pushing for education projects or for some awareness, and it was always shut down. And I felt, yeah, for me, that's not sustainable. That's not a sustainable way to do research. So my vision really was to come up with kind of a bit of a hybrid multidisciplinary project that would allow communities to contribute and participate and benefit at the end. And at the same time, yeah, do more cutting edge research and publish, and that's all very good. But to me, the thing that I find is missing in most projects is that there's no investment in the communities, and especially with whale sharks, who we've done the research now, and we know they bring in so much money for communities as a tourism asset. And many places will not look at this because, yeah, it's kind of it's a quite contradictory, and even finding funding now to support the development of sustainable tourism is difficult. But at the same time, we know how much money it's bringing, and we know people benefit on it. So there's kind of a win-win situation here that I think we can find together. But I'm quite idealistic on this. I'm not sure how reasonable it is, but so far we've been very lucky in kind of giving access to our knowledge.
That's amazing. Yeah. Just welcoming someone to the group there. If you keep your video and sound off, that's great. We're gonna have a chat and then do a Q&A at the end. Yeah. So tell us a bit about the threats to whale sharks. What are the sort of problems that they're facing? Why do they need study research concern?
So many threats. The main issue is that they grow really slowly. So for them to be able to reproduce, it's about 30 years. And yeah, at this point, 30 years in the ocean is not safe. They get hit by boats a lot, which is kind of we published last year about this, but it's likely one of the biggest threats, like all these container ships and petrol tanks. And there's a lot of traffic in the ocean, especially for like causing quite a lot of damage for species that feed on the surface. So that's one thing, and it's often fatal to them. There's also all the plastic floating around, and because they're filter feeders, they will swallow it. And despite the size of their mouth, it's actually very small. So they will likely die from that. And then there's all the fishing industry, which is major. And even if now some countries have observer programs, there's still a lot of demand for shark fins. Even if they're not directly targeted for this, they often get caught as bycatch because they will be around tunas and larger predators when they feed. So there's already quite a lot of problems. And then the fact that they're migratory makes it difficult to protect them in one place. Like even if you have all the right regulations in place in one country and they will cross a border or go into the open, like the high seas, then there's no protection. So yeah, it doesn't make it easy.
It's a real challenge, isn't it? I mean, I used to study birds and migratory birds a little bit back in the day.
Yeah, I remember.
Birds that travel across borders, huge distances, have multiple threats all along their kind of life cycle. It makes it really tough to understand the complexity and to make a real difference. Yeah. What are the some of the things you're doing at the Madagascar Whale Shark Project to help conserve them or to protect them better? Like what's been going on? So I know you've been doing like a code of conduct, and I think that addresses some of these things. Tell us maybe a bit about that.
Yeah, so it's really difficult not to be trying to I don't know, just constantly try to save these animals. Like there's so many levels that are beyond our control that, the fisheries and that are things we just cannot really control at this point. So my aim was really that when they come to feed in the region we study them, they're safe. So that was kind of the goal I had in mind. So yeah, for that we implemented in 2017 a code of conduct that exists kind of across the world, but usually people don't respect it, or it's not imposed, or people don't even know it's out there. So it's very easy for local operators to ignore and not follow it. So we were lucky because when we started the research in 2016, that industry was still kind of slow and small. So we could easily go and speak to all the operators and slowly convince them about why they need to follow this code of conduct, which has been proven again and again. But I mean, if the shark is not disturbed and it's happy feeding, then people are going to be happy taking pictures and they're going to give good reviews and a tip, and then everyone's kind of happy. So we've done that in a bit of a different way. Instead of just imposing this code of conduct, we give out these free workshops and free training, and we really kind of move and go meet people when they're free, because in season many people work like a lot. So we've tried to be very flexible and offer this kind of access to knowledge. And now we were kind of campaigning to get this code of conduct signed as a law, so that it's kind of officially an obligation, and it's been done for humpback whales in Madagascar. So I knew it was possible. So through a partnership with that same organization who did that for the humpback whales now, we wrote the text. It needs 3 signatures. It has one of the 3. I'm confident it's going to have the 2 others by the summer. So then it's going to be an obligation. But again, in these countries, enforcement is not always the answer. So I'm really trying to empower people to care about the sharks and to get to know them better. And so we do a lot of presentations and taking locals out to sea and all of this to kind of, really make them care about the sharks. And I'd say it's effective, but there's always people who are not going to follow rules. And so it's kind of a dual job in empowering local people on the ground to say no to someone who wants to, for example, ride a shark. And at the same time, there's all this global awareness and social media and talks about raising awareness globally. Because if you have rich people who come to a country like Madagascar, with money, they can buy anything, because it's just that poor. So I think there's a big job for us conservationists in also empowering people here, who then, when they will go to a place like that, they can ask for a code of conduct or have the right behavior, and that puts a lot less pressure on guides. So that's
holding the operators to account a little bit.
So that's something that's initially was kind of secondary, but it's becoming a big priority. So this year we're actually fundraising to organize a big training session that's kind of going to be compulsory for operators, and then we're getting local speakers and all of this, so that people are really kind of ready to accompany tourists and do the right thing. And then at the same time, we do regular research with photo identification, with sampling, with tags. We've done quite a lot of that, and we keep trying to do more, but they're difficult animals to study, and you need to be a good freediver, a good photographer. So again, initially I felt it was only certain people with a certain training who could access that, and I also wanted to get rid of that, because I don't think it is. I think anyone can contribute if you have the right tools. So now we've kind of designed a volunteer program that is now, I think, spot on. It took us a while to get the right formula, but it's over 3 weeks, and basically people without any training come and join, and then we train them in photo identification techniques, and they join the operators with the tourists, and then when the tourists swim with the sharks, they collect data, and that's pretty much 2/3 of our data we get this way now.
Wow.
So it still is. I wish it was even more open source, that anyone could do it, but you do need a bit of training, and there's quite a logistical challenge behind it to collate all of that data and sort it, and we use algorithms to recognize the sharks. So it's not so easy, but I'm glad we can at least come up with a program that allows anyone to join, and it's honestly specifically designed for people who don't want a career in marine conservation, but who want to contribute and love the ocean and want to do something useful for their holiday. So we kind of designed it that way. And then each year I train a local student who then does a master. So we've had 2 already. So they come on board with us, but it's a bit more complicated, because often Malagasy students don't really swim or are not that close to the ocean. So there's a bit more work to be done.
Yeah.
And then, the third kind of aspect is education. So we introduced an education program in 2018 that was kind of adapted from Marine Megafauna Foundation's one in Mozambique, who were close partners from the beginning. So we translated it and readapted it with the right content. And now it's a partner NGO local who's kind of running that. So they have 2 staff now who go around in schools, and there's kind of a whole program happening now around that.
So much going on. Yeah. Amazing. So you got code of conduct, which is going into law. You're doing environmental education with the local tourists and also the operators. You're training up volunteers to be citizen scientists. You're also training up students and supporting them through master's projects, and so much more besides. Gosh. Use the word we. Use the word we a lot. So where is the organization as a whole? Is it you and other volunteers? Do you have staff? Like what are we looking like as an organization right now?
Yeah, it's difficult, honestly, because it was mainly me kind of driving and pushing it. And then I had friends or old volunteers who were kind of dropping in when they had time. But I love that model. But at the same time, when there's a deadline or there's something urgent, it always ends up being me doing it. So since last year, so the project, just so you know, was kind of in pause during the whole COVID, and I wasn't sure it was ever gonna come back to life. So all of this, I'm telling you, it's from the last few months I was there that we really pushed through. But then there's a few long-term volunteers who are more invested, and then we kind of have a core team of 4 or 5 of us, where everyone kind of helps where they can. And we have 2 part-time staff. One is a Malagasy scientist who's also the volunteer coordinator and used to be a student. And the other one is a previous volunteer who's kind of running the admin tasks. And then I'm going to have a new Malagasy project leader managing all of that code of conduct from June onwards. But it's really challenging finding the right people because we communicate in both English and French, so often need kind of good bilingual or at least some ability. And then really, Nick, what I've learned through all of this process is that all the stuff you learn at university about science, like I'm not really doing any of that. It's mainly like a partner, managing partnerships and managing relationships with volunteers and team management and coordination. It's a lot of that I really had to learn from scratch, and that's sometimes not easy for me because I find it difficult to share what you do. I'm more of a person who does a lot on my own. So it's difficult to find people you can rely on, and obviously people need to earn money at some point. So if you want to keep quality people, you need to pay as well. And we have very small budget, and that's kind of the main challenge, is to fund this project.
And so are you a charity, and therefore you're securing donations from donors, from funders, from foundations, trusts, governments? How does the kind of, as much as you want to share, how does the money side of it work? How is it sustainably funded?
Since 2019 we're a registered foundation here in Belgium. So we have a separate bank account run by an accountant, so that means we can collect donations. So we do collect quite a few donations from people who have been to visit us. We get a few awards or donations from bigger partners, companies who sometimes want to fund, but it's a lot of work trying to get these people to give. And then there's grants, like research grants and stuff like that. But now really, with the volunteering, basically people pay a bit of money to come with us because we organize everything for them. And we have to rent boats, and all of that is pretty expensive, actually. And then now the new thing is I'm now kind of running these bespoke trips, opening up the doors of the project for people who want to, again, come on a holiday that's useful, where they can contribute and learn a few things. So we're testing this for this year to get a bit more of kind of long-term funding, whether or not we get grants, because it's a lot of work to apply for grants.
Yeah, so sort of almost becoming an operator yourself. Yeah. What has it been like setting up a project then for someone like yourself? You said you had loads of projects and quite a few were shelved. You've thrown all your effort into this one. Like, what has it been what you expected it to be? Like, what advice would you give other people who are thinking, I'd love to follow my passion and interest and start something? Like, just be honest. Like, what's it, what are the highs and lows of doing it?
Honestly, it's changed my life, and it's made me, I feel so much more confident in what I wanted to do. So I definitely really encourage anyone to get started. The one advice I would have is that I kind of went all in, like I quitted my job. I had nothing on the side. I went back to my parents. I isolated myself a lot doing this. And I think there's kind of a lot of preconception about, okay, you need to like give everything up to start a project that will work. But actually, I kind of regret even doing it like this, because I think there's so many options now with, part-time work or like working less or working from home, or there's all these different ways to kind of distance yourself from the typical 9 to 5 and go into this kind of, you work for yourself whenever you want to, which I love this flexibility, and I'm very irregular in my energy. Like I can't do a 9 to 5, but I can do like a morning, and that will do pretty much like a 3-day workload. So I love having that flexibility, but it's also a danger for people who are passionate, and I don't think we talk enough about this. But I mean, there is a real risk of like burning yourself out when you do something that you care about, especially when you're like one of the lead players in it. And so it's a tricky one, because you really need to watch out for yourself and be like accountable. If you work all weekends and every night, like I did for I don't know how many years, then yeah, you don't have a break and you're not sociable. And so we really need to be careful, I think, as as passionate conservationists, that it's not all on us to change the world. And I'm still very guilty of that myself, but it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to have a break. So there's that part is we have to watch out.
That's great advice. And across all jobs, I think, in conservation, particularly when you're kind of in it for the passion, it's very easy to almost be exploited or exploit yourself in this instance, by pushing too hard. Do you get who do you turn to for advice and support? Do you have a mentor or someone helping you? Because when you're at the top on your own, it can be quite lonely, I guess.
Yeah, I have a few, and it's I kind of always wanted that kind of it's difficult, right, to find advice because it's often patronizing or telling you what to do or telling you do something wrong. So I think it's very subtle to find the right people who can help you in a constructive way, who can push you in the right direction. And I was lucky to find that person pretty early on. It's Simon Pierce, who's kind of the lead researcher on whale sharks, who was the one who trained me up and pushed me to do this project. And he's been to Madagascar a few times now. And we still have regular conversations, and it's always great. But at the same time, now I have other people who will ask for honest advice, and it's not even people in my field. I think, I was initially like, I really wanted to do, to learn everything by myself and to really kind of keep growing. And it's really fulfilling that you realize you can do so much more than what you thought you were capable. And it's also about knowing yourself and discovering, new things you didn't know about yourself that you're good at. Like it's pretty empowering. But at the same time, there's so many things other people do better than us. So now I'm at the point where I'm honestly a bit tired of this rhythm, and I'm quite happily seeking advice from like communications agency about how we communicate. There's all these other specialists who actually I think we need a lot more in conservation to make us look like decent, because at the end you're just another company selling a product in a very competitive environment, because everyone's needing money and wanting to change the world. Like there's a lot of competition with other NGOs, I find, and not so much help with each other.
That's so true. Yeah. I mean, it's a question I often ask in the podcast, but now it's quite timely actually from what you just said. Like, I think as a global community of conservationists, we're all doing our best, but actually, largely wildlife is in decline and we're losing a lot of biodiversity across the globe. What do we as conservationists need to be better at? What do we need to do more of? Like, what are we doing wrong?
It's a good question. I think this one thing I just said, thinking like we can fix it just being passionate and having a drive is we need everyone in this fight, and we need all the specialists who are very good at their jobs. And I mean, yeah, communicators, accountants, like all of these people who will be able to make it more stable on the long term, because that's, I feel, is so often the problem. And I see it a lot in Madagascar. There's so many people coming with good intentions and passion and drive, but then they get tired because it's even more complicated than here, and the processes are long. I mean, we've been fighting for this law since 2019. And it's always up to us to like ask again and call again, and it's really like double the work, I think, of a developed country, if I can say. So I think we need to have more stability and more be more professional as organizations. And at the same time, I wish there was more interest in funding conservation, because I feel personally, I feel it's a real problem. And I don't know, especially since I came back a few months ago with now all these other issues, right, of the price of living increasing, of Ukraine, of there's all these even more pressing issues. I feel conservation is always secondary, and there's a lot of judging. And I mean, even the other day, I was told, like, you have to stop flying because, you're polluting this way. And like, I feel it's always like trying to justify what you do. And I think we really need to cut that and have more support for each other as a community. And then anyone who's earning decent money and having an interest in conservation, it's not only like I want to fund a specific project. It's mainly, do I enjoy being in wildlife? I do, so I should be funding it. Like, I really believe in that kind of action. So I wish there was more support, because I think it's one of the reasons it's failing a bit, is that it's just not enough like financial support.
Yeah.
And even myself, after it's going to be the 7th year I'm doing this. I mean, I'm still not earning a minimal salary. So I have to do other jobs on the side, or I have to just like not travel for years, or not take holidays. And it's, for good reasons, people give up.
Yeah. Well, that's absolutely my next question, actually, which is, how are you staying motivated? How are you staying optimistic? How are you still banging the drum about the law in Madagascar? What's keeping you on track? When other people have ebbed away, you're still going. You're still passionate. Yeah,
it comes and goes, honestly. I think it's really important that I keep, and some people said this a few weeks ago, but what can I say? Like, by doing what we do, we inspire and we trigger action in other people, which I think is much bigger than we think. So I kind of really see it as a responsibility that I keep doing this, because like we have all these volunteers coming and all these students wanting to join, and it's important that it kind of continues beyond just me or my team. So, but at the same time, like, we need to look after ourselves so we don't burn out, right? So it's a tricky one. I really have ups and downs. At days I feel like it's so minute what we're trying to do compared to like the fisheries industry and to all of these things. But at this point, it's it's really the small wins. It's often especially last year, I'll always remember it was like my last week and I was exhausted and I just wanted to go home, and it was raining, and this fisherman who's my age, who's kind of selling fish opposite the street, he came to have a drink with me, and he said, you've changed my view on fishing. I come to all your presentations every week, and you've changed my view of fishing, and now I will not fish the small ones, because it's important what you do, and that meant the world to me. So it's difficult to keep the motivation up, but it's I really see it as a responsibility now, and I saw it fully this year after having been away for nearly 3 years. Like, I had kind of forgotten the urgency of it, and then we get kind of used to our own comfort, and like it's pretty fun and comfortable to be in Europe, and you have all these food and all this shopping. Like it's 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 things we forget.
Yeah.
But then it really struck me when I saw the tourism's back on track. It's even bigger than before because people are desperate to make money after Madagascar was shut down. There were no planes for nearly 2 years.
Wow.
So all the tourism industry was like non-existent. And even if it's going to be tricky and difficult, and it was never my plan to manage tourism, I'm still limiting impact, whereas if I wasn't there, it would be worse. So that's kind of how I see it now. And it's sad to realize that in conservation now we're limiting impact, right? But I think it's kind of how it's looking now more and more, but it still is very important, valid. So
thank you for being so honest and open. I think that's really important as well. Yeah. And from what I hear and what I see, you're having huge impact, and it's like ripple effects with other people out there. And I guess your challenge is, how do you make it financially viable and sustainable? And how do you not burn out? And if you can kind of address those two things, off you go. Yeah, fantastic. And it takes time to figure these things out. Yeah, and you've had a big pause in the middle of COVID, which was difficult. Yeah.
And then there's another thing I want to say, which maybe it's a bit positive than what I said last, is when I was back here in COVID, like I really struggled to find work, and it was always, I mean, you know how it is being in the career sector, but it's but you're going to go back to Madagascar and we can trust you. And it was all these kind of, there was always something wrong with me wanting to look for a job in my home country in Belgium. Mm-hmm. And then now that I'm back doing like what I feel is very natural, like it's happening very naturally. And I think there's also a comfort in that, in knowing you're in the right place doing the right thing that suits you.
Yeah.
And even if it's difficult in many aspects, it still feels it's how I want to be working. I want to be working with the people I chose to work with. When it's sunny, I want to be able to not work that afternoon and go outside. So I love having that flexibility. And
I love that. You found your niche, haven't you? You found your sweet spot. Yeah, you're sort of in your lane. As we start to wrap up, we've got a couple of people listening as well, which is lovely, and we'll turn to them for questions in a minute. What advice would you give people who are not necessarily wanting to follow in your footsteps, but wanting to work in conservation? Let's say you're a student at university or someone mid-career looking to switch in. What are the kind of key things for people to bear in mind that will help them to be employable and help them to find work?
Yeah, I mean, again, so many things I wish I knew before. And I would really encourage people to not get training in biology. Like, even if you're studying biology or marine and that you love it, like, keep doing that. But at the same time, get useful skills, which are, languages, project management, team management, and all of these, right? Which is life experience. So I would really push you to, every holiday, every opportunity you have, go learn a new skill. And it's not these CV skills that we talk about, which is like, oh, do you have your dive master? Because there's 1,000 people like you who have a dive master who I'm not going to employ because they don't have that can-do attitude, which, if you want to work in the field, is like essential to be able to. If you want to work in remote, then go try remote, because it's not for everyone. Mm-hmm. And I recently, last season, I had someone who came for 3 days, I think, and left because it wasn't for her. And it's completely fine. But you need to know that about yourself before you sign up for jobs and for experiences that will, keep you there for a bit, because you get homesick, you get sick. Like it's tricky. So a good field experience, not like a 2-week one, like a 5-month one, to really see if that's for you. How do you enjoy it? And bit by bit kind of work down that line where you know what suits you, because I think that's so important, and something I totally miss when I did my initial career choices. I just studied biology because I love animals, but really it's not my strength to be, academic and dedicated to learning. It's not what I enjoy doing. I enjoy coordinating and bringing ideas to life. And I think these are really these are equally strong skills that we need to be supporting. so yeah, I would say get more experience in companies, in businesses, in things that have nothing to do with specifically biology, and get to know yourself so that you know what you want, because very often you do all the training and then you do one job and you realize that's not for me, and then you have to go all again. So I think generally we need a lot more transparency about what suits us, and to be honest with that. And still there's so much pressure from society to like finish your studies and then do this and then do a PhD. And I mean, I never even qualified for getting funding for a PhD, but I still publish more than I would have done with a PhD. So I think there's so many ways now to have impact, but it's really down to knowing what suits us and what we're good at and what feels easy. Because there's some horrible jobs out there that even if you want it with all your heart, you will not enjoy doing it. And that's when you burn out and when you stop.
Yeah. Loads of great advice in there, Stella. Yeah, thank you. I particularly enjoy and also reflect like the importance of education. I think education is really important. And if you want to get a degree or a master's, it's going to help you in lots and lots of different ways. And it's great. And if you're doing that already, brilliant. But experience is so important. Like, we've just done a little bit of research ourselves, and we identified like 11 main job types in conservation. We used to talk about 15. We're refining it down to 11 now as the kind of set that we see. Fundraising, communications, all sorts. Project management, wardens and researchers and scientists and so on. And when we look across them, of those 11, 9 you don't necessarily need education for. Experience can win. If you get experience of doing those jobs, it can make you really employable for them. So it's quite interesting to sort of reflect on the importance of like university education nowadays, and whether even universities are training people up for the sorts of skills. And you mentioned this at the top, really, whether they are genuinely delivering the skills that people need within the industry.
I don't think so. And I think that's why we're having this huge gap of having lots of young people wanting experience and then very few jobs, because it's like, you don't have the experience. And at the same time, we have that funding problem. But just to give you an example, like last year we deployed acoustic tags, which I never did before. And I was supposed to get help from other people who couldn't make it because COVID funding. So it was all down to me to like make it work. And I'll spare you the details, but you have to like aim at a shark and, use like a bit like of a gun, something similar to a gun. And there's all these moving pieces of like, all these conditions need to align so the tag will insert into the shark and stay. And at the end, it was the local guys I knew who helped me out, the guy from the corner, Saeed, who's a great to-do man. And I told him I need this kind of, metal. Do you have it? And then he went to find it, and then someone else made it. And then my friend Thomas, who's French but has lived his whole life in Madagascar. He's a great waterman. So we were able to coordinate that when he was guiding, he would be doing the tagging because I needed to be in the water to like take the photo. And in the end, I didn't really use anyone who has a scientific background. It's not about that. It's about troubleshooting and, finding solutions in places where, you don't have access to Amazon or IKEA. It's just about can do attitude. And so it was we found a way and we succeeded. So
amazing. And on that really positive note, I want to thank you for jumping in and sharing everything that you have with us. We're going to wrap up now. We're going to open to Q&As for people that are sat here listening as well. We've never done this before. That's really fun. But before we do that and stop recording, like if people want to find out more about you, the Madagascar Whale Shark Project, like where should they go? Where should we send them?
I have a website, which is stelladiamant.com, which has kind of my work on it.
Yep.
And each time I do a podcast or interview, I put it on there. So I think it's important. For me, it's important to share what I know now. And then we also have our website, which is madawhalesharks.org. And that's all about the project. And there you can find our upcoming trips or the volunteering. But like I said, it's not aimed at people wanting to do biology. So, but it still is. We're still hoping to bridge a gap there and offer, impactful holidays or time away where you can contribute and learn more about a project.
Sounds wonderful. I'd love to do it myself one day. Yeah.
And then I kind of launched a Patreon page, which is kind of small at the moment, where I kind of do these voice notes about what we've been doing and the challenges, and it's pretty blunt and transparent about what I'm experiencing if people want to know more about that.
Great. And where do they find that one? Sorry.
It's on Patreon, and it's
Patreon.
patreon.com/Madagascar Whale Shark, I think.
Yep. Got you. We'll find that. We'll put links in as well in the footnotes. So that's great.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Stella. We're going to stop recording at this point, go to the audience, take some questions, and take things from there. But thanks again.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, I hope you enjoyed that, everyone. If you did, then please do hit the subscribe button to get notified of new episodes as they drop. And also please give us a rating or a review, because it really helps us to get in front of more people. Now, if you want our help to get clear and get started and get hired as a professional conservationist, I recommend you enroll in our free online training program, exploring how to get a conservation job. So if you're a student, a job seeker, or a career switcher, you'll learn the golden rule about how to get started, the key mistakes to avoid, and also we'll answer your biggest questions. You can check that out at conservation-careers.com/free. See you soon.